Good morning. Welcome, everybody. This is my first time at BSides DE. The first time, welcome also. Today's talk is going to be about non-crypto attacks and crypto messengers, and I'll get to a discussion exactly the definitions that I'm using that actually mean. A little bit about me. I'm really a software developer, not a security guy, but I have been doing security for a very long time, like on the side. And anybody who has worked with anti-spam technology, I had a hand in a lot of the standards there. Also, if you work with CSV files, I've written the closest standard for CSV. But I am doing application security for the last year or so. One disclaimer here is that my employer likes what I do, but they do not want to be mentioned by name in this talk. So I'm here on personal initiative, and everything that I'm saying is not endorsed by them. Don't do anything that I'm talking about to your friend or somebody else before asking a lawyer. This is a quote from War Games. Sometimes the best thing is not to do anything at all. I'm going to touch on a lot of different things. You may be tempted to do them. Don't do them unless you know what you're doing. Now, what prompted this talk? End-to-end encryption is becoming more common. And what happens is the debate that's going on right now actually has two absolutes. On one hand, you have people who essentially say, sort of the libertarian view, where crypto is the way to go, will protect us from governments and everything else. That's a common saying you find on Bitcoin forums, crypto we trust. On the other hand, you have the Prime Minister of Australia who essentially says that they will outlaw mathematics that have to do with crypto. What prompted my talk is that neither side is right, and obviously there are things that are in between. So what I want to look at is what would it look like to attack a system that employs end-to-end encryption but doesn't actually attack the cryptography itself. End-to-end encryption is one layer, and we know that in security, the concept of a security onion, there's multiple layers. That's what I'm curious about. So what I in this talk did is kind of did some thought exercise, did some research, and figured out, what are the ways you can attack somebody who's using end-to-end encryption, but not to attack the math. And I'm not going to mention any crypto attacks, so no hard bleeds here. Some of these attacks may be very simplistic. They may actually be almost non-technical. The bottom line is they get the job done. They will get you content of the particular message or whatever it is you're looking for. Also, there's a technical discussion. I'm not here to pass judgment on whether it's all right or not right to surveil. I'm not here to discuss whether it's okay for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to force Apple to break an iPhone. That's not what my discussion is about. I'm a techie. I'm not a congressman or senator. These are discussions for the society as a whole. I really want to talk about the technical aspects. But when I mention certain things in this talk, it seems political nature. I'm not being political. I'm also going to mention specific vendors. I'm not picking on them. It just happened to be the examples that I found. A lot of the stuff in this talk is done by other people. I will mention some of the original research I did, but a lot of it's been happening in the community by multiple people. This is not an exhaustive list. We could be sitting here for days talking about every single crypto. I'm not here to do that. I'm simply here to run through some common attacks. And really the point of this is, the last point is sort of to, this is intended to spark conversation around end-to-end crypto, specifically in regards to how to secure the other layers. When we are reasonably sure that the crypto itself is secure, let's look at the other layers. So I'm going to talk about first what I call crypto messengers. And I want to talk about 4 types of attacks. Attacking the human user, and here I mean not the actual device, but I'm talking about the actual person. Endpoint attacks, attacking the device. Network server attacks, attacking the network or the server that's supporting the messaging infrastructure. And then supply chain attacks, primarily around what I call the software development tool chain. But we'll talk a little bit about the hardware. And sort of there's some stuff that's really scary on the supply chain side. And then sum it up also in the end about sort of the point that I'm trying to press. Now, what do I call a crypto messenger? Now, there's no standardized terminology for this. What I call a crypto messenger is you have an app that supports end-to-end encryption over the internet. So if you're using a handheld radio, that's not a crypto messenger. Specifically, they usually run on mobile devices. There are desktop clients, there are web clients, but today, majority of this technology operates on a mobile device. Android and iOS are the two primary operating systems. There may be a BlackBerry device here and there. There may be a Windows device here and there. But majority of them are two platforms, Android and iOS. There's a whole bunch of examples there. It's not exhaustive. You got WhatsApp, which is the largest end-to-end encryption app in the world, run by Facebook. You got Signal, which WhatsApp uses as its encryption. There's Threema. There's the Facebook Messenger. You got Keybase. Google has two products, Allo and Duo. One's for messaging, one's for voice. There's Telegram, which is an interesting one because Telegram was founded by the same person who founded the Russian clone of Facebook, called vk.com. And then when the government decided to get rid of him, they came out of the country, started Telegram. There's Apple iMessage, there's Line, which is popular in Asia. There's Wickr, which is an anonymous social network. There's CryptoCat, and again, the list can go on and on and on about what possible examples are there. One example I didn't mention is OTR, which is an extension for Jabber and other providers that kind of overlays end-to-end crypto over an existing communication network. But these are what are called crypto messengers. So essentially, mobile devices, end-to-end encryption, messaging primarily. What do I mean by end-to-end encryption? So those of you who have worked with legacy protocols, the initial communication network that the internet was founded on didn't necessarily support real-time connections. A lot of the protocols have what's known as store and forward or hop-to-hop. UUCP, not really used anymore. FidoNet is a great example, which is not really used. SMTP is one of the ones that kind of left over. HTTPS, which we think of normally as end-to-end, is the example is work in an enterprise environment. You got your proxies, encrypt traffic. Anybody who used Cloudflare, their Cloudflare decrypts your content from the origin server and then re-encrypts it again once it goes out to users. So it's definitely not end-to-end. What end-to-end is, so these are models that are store and forward, hop-to-hop. That's not end-to-end. What I mean by end-to-end is only the two users on each side of the connection can actually see the message. Even if other people see the message in between, they do not possess the technical loop what's inside. And there may be routing data that's present, but that doesn't give you, there's no key changed. And I'm going to show you an example. So from the EFF, this is how the SMTP protocol works. And essentially, you're connecting from your end to either a web client, like Gmail, or you're using something like SMTP in its sending mode, 4565, that may or may not use encryption. Your message then goes to a messaging server, goes to another messaging server, goes to another messaging server, goes to another messaging server. Your receiver will use either IMAP, POP, or HTTPS to retrieve the message. Each of those hops may be encrypted, may not be encrypted. This is what is currently used in SMTP. There is some work around, there is TLS support in the SMTP protocol, but it's not enforced hop-to-hop basis. There's some work around that currently going on. Now, this example, let's say you want to do end-to-end encryption. So you cannot trust the SMTP. So what you would do is you would either do PGP or SMIME, encrypt the message at the origin. Even though it's traveling over multiple hops, none of the parties in between have the capability of looking inside. And then the receiver, after they retrieve the message, they will use either PGP or SMIME for the message. This will be an example. Standard email is store and forward or hop-to-hop. End-to-end encrypted email will be using another layer, PGP, or you'll be using SMIME on top. Now, what can you do to attack somebody's messenger? So most people think it's just number one, text. Now text, and I'm going to give you an example in a moment, is pretty useful for an attacker. You could do a lot of things with it. Now, there's other things, and I want to highlight here, there's stuff within those messengers that people share. Hyperlinks are in there. If you have access to people's hyperlinks, not have access to content, that still gives you a lot of information. There's files that are being retrieved, transferred over the messenger that are not content, not message content. They also can give a lot of information. I will give some examples. There's metadata. You can figure out when messages are received and sent. You have ability to do network correlation there. Figure out that 1 kilobyte packet came from a person, 1 to that person, you can actually figure out who's talking to who. There's an attack that came out a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, about attack when somebody's on WhatsApp at the same time and extrapolate from talking to each other. Some more crazy type of attacks, telemetry and biometrics. The virtual keyboard can capture telemetry. Telemetry is how you write. Biometrics is how you type. That information can be used to break anonymity. Some research papers are claiming 85%. And again, your message can be end-to-end encrypted, but if your virtual keyboard on your Android device is for typing metrics, they can identify who you are by correlating that with the encrypted message traffic. Social connections. Chats are very popular. Group chats are very popular. Who are living in Saudi Arabia? Who are in a group chat? Talking about Arabia. It doesn't matter what you write. You get arrested. If you're an admin, some countries, they will hold you responsible for all the things your members of your group. The social connections, again, it's an independent type of data from everything else. Social connections are very important also, and they can be leaked independent of the actual message content. Now, example, why? This is a quote from Cardinal Richelieu. Those who read the protagonist. Essentially, if you have messages that are written by somebody, if you have every single message that's written, every single life, somebody will find something in it. It could be something innocuous. They will take it out of context, and I don't have to tell you, you could go read. I mean, this is happening every day. So there's obviously is interest in people who are using these type of technology, not to message content. The same thing goes for everything else that I mentioned. Even besides the message content, being in a group with somebody, talking to somebody, sharing a hyperlink to a forbidden site, that can get you in jail. As a matter of fact, somebody in here was just prosecuted for possessing the anarchist cookie. He got off free. But you have to keep in mind that the First Amendment is an American thing. The rest of the world does not follow the First Amendment. And a lot of the things that we take for granted here are not true. Last thing, important point to keep in mind, there are different threats vary by different actors. Somebody is using Snapchat, message with a friend, only care about somebody in the same classmate. They're not going to worry about Russia breaking in. Journalists, on the other hand, if you have a guy like Glenn Green, who is dealing with NSA stuff that Snowden revealed, that's a whole different threat model. So I'm going to mention a lot of different attacks, but they will vary depending on who you are and who your threats are. However, unfortunately, as storage and memory gets cheaper and analysis, automated analysis becomes cheaper, mass collections of data become more prevalent, and access to become more prevalent. So threat models are actually converging. So somebody may choose to attack Snapchat en masse, also get out of it. People who are using it normally would not be considered threats to that person. So this all will vary from attack to attack. Let's get to the attacks. I'm sure you probably have seen this. The fastest way to break crypto is to use a wrench. How do we attack the human? And what I'm going to talk about is not attacking the endpoint. I'm talking about the actual human that's using the device. I'm going to run through some things. They may seem simplistic, but like I said, they get the job done. First example, your grandma wants to use WhatsApp. She goes on her phone and she types in WhatsApp. Guess what? She has no way to know if the application she downloaded is real. If you're in a country like China, where VPN apps have been in the App Store, or if you're in Russia, where messages, you have to sideload. Sideload means in the Android world, you download the APK and install the device manually. On the iOS side, you're going to jailbreak the device and put the application in. Do you have any idea what you're downloading? So on one hand, you have trust issues in the App Store itself, and it gets even worse than when you're dealing with stuff outside the App Store. There's no easy way to know for an average user the application they're installing through the App Store. Why? Because it will cost you $25 to sign up. It will take you a couple hours to put it in an Android app. Google does not really check. Now, if you have a high visibility target, they may, even somebody like WhatsApp, they will have to issue a trademark request to take down somebody. So I don't know what the solution is. But obviously there's a problem here because the trust issue in app stores is a big problem. And here are some examples. Telegram. Now, I'm not picking Telegram specifically, just the example I found. Symbol of Telegram is the paper airplane. This is a screenshot from the Google Play on the web that I took last week. As you can see, how many paper airplanes over there? Lots of them. This one is the real one. The rest are fake. But if I'm a smart user, I'll take a look. Who is the company? You can't really see, but this company says Telegram Messenger. All of the other ones don't have the vendor name as Telegram. One of them says Telegram. But again, an average user is doing this, Telegram Lite. They don't know. They install something fake, get their credentials stolen, and that's the end of the story for them. This example came out last week. Somebody noticed on Reddit that there are multiple versions of WhatsApp. Guess what? The vendor name, hey, WhatsApp Incorporated, WhatsApp Incorporated. What did people do? Google Play, you put some spaces in, you put characters in. Google will swallow them when they show them in the App Store. Can an average user figure out the difference between the real two on the top left? What about all the other ones with the telephone icon? They're not going to be able to do that. Same thing. They'll install something, get their credentials stolen. Last example, not to pick on Android, I searched through iTunes for WhatsApp. There's 4 different WhatsApp applications show up in iTunes. They are slightly different. But again, if you're an average user, are you going to know? You're not going to know. So that's the first attack. Evil Maid, I didn't name this. Very simple. Leave your phone unlocked. Kid opens hotel room, China especially. Go out, someone walks in. Phone. You're going through border security. Now, obviously, always encrypt your phone. But here's the problem. Why don't these apps don't have secondary locks? Somebody opens up your phone. Fine, they opened it. If there's a secondary pin on the actual messaging app, then they're not going to be able to. Obviously, we're not talking about don't use fingerprint. Another solution is iOS is currently just implemented an extra check. You have fingerprint protection in your phone, plug into you. So if somebody takes your phone and wants to image, you're not going to be able to do it so easily. But obviously, there's this space. You need to have more controls, more solutions. If you're making an app for journalists to use, there are more protections around it. The wrench attack, which I mentioned earlier, it's problematic. So some of the research now is coming out. For example, you could have older messages that get re-encrypted or deleted. When I mean by encrypted, you need both parties to open them up. You don't have the content for them to look at. PIN numbers. This is actually becoming more interesting research. You could have more than one set of PIN numbers. Second PIN number, and what they see is innocuous. For a third PIN number, it throws harm to someone. So there are some solutions here where essentially, again, the app itself, if it assumes a bigger threat model, there's controls you could put in there, but they don't. Friend. This is not even a technical attack. No, you have a group chat that's talking about something that's restricted in your country. Somebody gets infiltrated in. Why does WhatsApp use phone identity? But somebody gets in and they can get the membership. Membership list can be coupled in a group chat from their real identity on the app. It could be decoupled from their real world identity. There was an attack on WhatsApp a while back where every group member becomes an admin. What kind of content can you exchange? Lock things down. Because group chats are more vulnerable to these type of attacks. There are ongoing issues with interfaces. The first point, I'm going to show you an example. Even if something has end-to-end encryption, it doesn't. Google Allo, Facebook Messenger, Telegram, and a bunch of others do not enable it because their business reasons not to. It's very hard for a user to enable the default. When WhatsApp, the reason why other countries hate that from a legal standpoint, because average users are fooled. Oh, without Telegram, Telegram is encrypted. You could the other problem also is handling notifications. When someone changes the crypto key, so if you're using this type of environment and you get a notification
signal of WhatsApp, your key has changed, are you going to call up your friend and ask him, hey, by the way, did you change your key? No. If your phone is compromised, you wouldn't know.
So there's another problem. There's an ongoing problem around UI, both on fooling users that they're protected and how when the crypto itself is changing. And I don't know if there's a solution for it, but it's something to be aware of. Last one is an attack on WhatsApp. It's not really an attack, but essentially somebody changes their phone, the user sending the WhatsApp message will
re-encrypt automatically to the new phone, even though they haven't verified it. Here's an example from
Telegram, and Telegram is giving you a nice overview why they do not want to enable end-to-end encryption. There's a parallel discussion in every other app why we don't want to do end-to-end encryption. The thing is, if you're not going to enable the default, I don't see how you're going to let the user know that they are not protected. Unless you put like glaring sirens.
Last one.
Content spoofing. Same problem as an email, pretty old. Real world example, someone sent me this link, get your free membership. The last O in Costco isn't real. If you put the same thing in Chrome on the right side, you'll see the what the real URL looks like. I've actually notified Facebook about it. The answer was, we have an automated
system that prevents this from happening. If they're encrypted, they don't, how is that possible? And then they send a follow-up message, oh, we do not have an automated system.
Either way, my point with this particular one is, these are the same attacks that are happening in the web. Same attacks that are happening in email. You're reinventing a third messaging
technology. Please do some homework.
Copy that over. You should implement the same type of handling. Like for example, the link there. Put the real hyperlink in where brackets, do something. They're not quite there yet. So these are things that we're fooling the user into doing something.
Second one.
Endpoint. So let's assume that we're dealing with a smart cookie. Can't fool him. Great. We're not going to be able to fool him. The quote from Edward Snowden. Once again, I said this is not a political talk, so I'm not endorsing or not endorsing what you're saying. My point is from a technical standpoint view, really, he's right. Endpoint security is so bad that you can run a freight train through it. And this section, I'm going to talk about some of those attacks. Very simple. You download your WhatsApp.
I didn't know it's real.
I know it's real. I didn't know what's in it. The problem is that end-to-end encryption is used, but you don't know in open source world, in the binary matches
the source.
What we call this is there's no verifiable builds. There's no third-party audits necessarily. There's no disclosure program. So if you have a closed source messenger like WhatsApp, nobody has any right. If you have an open source messenger, Telegram or Signal, you have the source code, but you don't know what happened from the source code till it actually got packaged and signed and put on your device. And you don't know if it became compromised. Some of the examples that I gave in the bottom, verifiable builds are very hard. Linux is working on it. A verifiable build basically makes sure that the binary tab matches the source code. Very hard problem to solve. Third-party audits are useful, assuming that you know who's doing the audit and that the right thing, paying for it. I just saw a third-party audit somewhere but had no findings at all. Always fine. The last one is disclosure programs. I'm a little biased here because I do bounties. What I'm asking here is not bounties. Have a way to engage with the and encourage researchers to go ahead and rip side. Give us a little bit more of what's inside the app. Example of Telegram. Again, I'm not picking on him specifically. He claims that 6 months ago, when he was in the United States, FBI got one of his developers in a cafe and brought him to the backdoor in. His ex-employee came out last month and says, by the way, Telegram has been developed in Russia. Employees. Iran and Russia are suing and finding Telegram because obviously they don't feel they have end-to-end encryption is turned off. Now, right, I have no idea. But guess what? Telegram is open source, but the builds are not verifiable. They don't have third-party audits. Crypto. And I'll get to the, later on I'll mention, we don't know what's running on the server. I don't know. So I'm approaching it from a point of view, it's a black box. How do I find out what's in the box? Next example, metadata. File exchange. If images and videos carry GPS coordinates by default. They carry the model serial number in the picture. Does a messenger app know to stream? Some don't. WhatsApp, I think, happens out. If anybody remembers the Melissa worm from the 90s, there was a MAC address that was embedded in the document, and they were able to track directly to the server. Even if, let's say, they strip things out from images and videos, are they going to do the same document? Probably not. WhatsApp allows you to do the document. I find it very hard to believe that they have capability to check metadata everywhere. Is your messenger aware about the metadata? Are your users aware? Applications built in. Last point, why are messenger identities tied to phone numbers? Those could be leaked also. Again, there's a lot of metadata that gets. Let's assume you've got your verifiable the ability to put it on your own phone. You trust it. You search every single line of code. You have other apps on the phone. Talking about a non-rooted. Can you trust it? Not necessarily. Now, I used to be a mobile developer. Broadcast on Android is like a system. Let's say your app, every time it gets a message, it's broadcasted. Every other apps can catch. Another example is Black Secure capturing. For example, another one, message data. WhatsApp does not encrypt files. Files are lying around, even your chats. I've actually reported to them. That's the CV number. Fixed. I mean, they fix it. Okay? But imagine that. You're a journalist. You're crossing the border. You erase all these. Take the phone. It's full of when you're there. The question is, can you trust your other apps? I don't know if you can. OS features. Is the phone backing up data? So if you're saving stuff in an SD card, this is very common Google Photos. Save, it automatically picks it up. What other things is OS? Virtual keyboard, which I mentioned earlier. Keyboard on Android actually has an option. I don't. But it could be tied to identity. OSs can collect diagnostic and logging data. OnePlus was written about apps. Once you're talking on the OS level, you don't know what's being. And the problem is that when they're designing applications, again, I'm not picking on them necessarily. It's true for every application. But if you're going to make an application with higher security, you got to do your homework. And a lot of people who don't work in mobile don't realize that these things. And the last one, obviously, I mean, that's the OnePlus. The firmware in your phone is usually funneled through carrier. Or if you're rooting the phone, do you know what firmware is in there? You don't. Again, the same problem with the verifiables for the apps exists for the Android firmware and for the iOS firmware. It's hard to kind of prove it. OnePlus is an example where the firmware itself was sending data out. Last piece, there's been a lot of research recently. Your phone has more than one operating system. You've got your OS, but you've got your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip that has its own code. You've got the baseband modem, which is totally separate. You've got coprocessors. A lot of code running on your phone, and we don't actually know what's. Every once in a while, somebody breaks into one, like the Bluetooth one, Broadcom that was recently. But most people don't possess the skills to do that, and that's an issue. That's why the black phone exists, which is supposed to be a more secure hardware. So, first attack is attacking the user. Second one is attacking the endpoint. Now, how do we attack the network or the server? End-to-end encryption. Once the message leaves the device, you should be able to see it. You know what's running on the server? So you have no idea what's running there. Let's assume end-to-end encryption is working correctly. No. It's very hard to hide everything else. Specifically the social graphs, who's talking to who, messages and send metadata. Very hard to do that. For Telegram and the like, when there's end-to-end encryption and non-end encryption, obviously content is available. There's some very interesting research that Signal's doing, where they're forcing server code running in, they run in a secure enclave in the Intel processor. It's very theoretical, very like out there. But I mean, the simple example, you don't know. Now what's interesting is an example of Tor. You don't know where the Tor node is running, but your attacker doesn't know which Tor node you. So that's also an interesting possibility. Third-party assurance is one possibility, but if you have a decentralized messaging network where the attacker doesn't know which node is run, some way for the node to certify what it's running correct. There may be some room there. This is This is pretty famous. Phone network is not secure. If you have direct access to it, you could get anybody's phone numbers, you could do anything. There was I forgot the name of the publication. It cost about $4,000 or $5,000 to get access to SSM. Most crypto messengers tie user identity to the phone number. They verify through SMS. You have access to SMS. You have access to the messenger. Backbone access, a couple $1,000. You could force porting of a number. Doesn't cost anything at all. You could clone a SIM card. You could enable SMS forwarding by breaking into somebody's account. This one is an interesting example, the last one. This one. A Russian politician, forced for deposition, woke up one morning, got a message from his phone carrier that his phone number was 6 hours. Give it back. In those 2 hours, they were able to decrypt all his solution, don't use SMS. Don't tie the identity to the phone number. Downside to it is if you don't, then you lose the password, you lost access. Cloud messaging. This is again something that people aren't aware. Every single Android device, every single phone, every single iOS device are tied to what's known as cloud messaging. And it's used for doing push. Essentially, from a company to Apple to device, from a company to Google to the device. The problem is some messengers are relying on this, and some of them are relying on encryption there. There's no encryption. Encryption is point to point, it's not end to end. I ran into this when I was working on some HIPAA stuff. Even if you are encrypting, the metadata. Again, those things I mentioned earlier, like timing attacks. People who are going to Android don't realize how this works, and a lot of times they are using it and they're relying on it, and it's not really. This is very common, and I could tell you hundreds of examples. Don't roll your own networking. And I've seen this over and over and over. And I can tell you there's lots and lots of examples. I know of at least 2 apps that I tracked myself that they were supposed to be end-to-end encrypted. They were not verifying SSL. So the initial sort of packets, once you've captured them, you capture the encryption key and you're done. CertCC did some interesting work in 2014. They have a software that mass tested like a million apps, found a whole bunch of them vulnerable. Guess what? Nothing. Usually I find the reason for that is because they are thinking they can do it better themselves, or they need latency or whatever. Some of them use third party as the case. Very, very common. This one, I mentioned the example from WhatsApp. Now, this is a big problem. Everything is imagine the internet antenna. Almost happened with IP version. How do you handle abuse? Very, very hard. And the problem is if you want to strike a balance between allowing encryption versus allowing catching abuse, it's very, very hard. So the systems we're talking about is hashing. Hashing is currently used for some things. The problem with hashing is that the hash can be mapped to itself. So the example of Kaspersky, they captured something that belonged to them based on a hash, structured up to the cloud. You could have somebody who has control over the messaging, the abuse, and they're putting in sort of flags. They want to be flagged when people else, for example, the hyperlink earlier, and that abuse system will send data back and notify them. They will notify when people transfer certain files. Now, the abuse system is deployed at the endpoint. Encrypted content doesn't get expected, but it gets expected on the endpoints. Nevertheless, it still needs to talk to the mothership because in the mobile, it's very constrained. You cannot download a 100 byte database of all things that are bad. This is a problem. There's an IETF draft that talks about how to do this on the internet. They don't. Last one. Quote from John Glenn. Unfortunately, this applies very much to software. In our case, instead of rockets, we build software with components, which is supported by, in some cases, by one main. OpenSSL and TP have bare-bone budgets, and bugs. True. So, that's the supply chain. Supply chain software, you've got the actual build process. You've got the libraries that you're putting in. You've got the tools that operate the build. You have your source code repository. It travels to your build server. It goes somewhere else for testing. Eventually, it ends up on some server which digitally signs the application, gives it to Android or iOS. any one of those components can be attacked, even if you don't attack the source code. Hardware attacks are even crazier. You got the developer that's typing on his or just came out yesterday. The keyboard driver was sending stuff, or the chips inside the Lenovo can be sending somewhere else. Many parts of the supply chain are much weaker. Some examples of compromising the software supply chain: CC Cleaner, Altima, which is a Mac OS application. People keep hijacking Chrome extensions, npm, IP. NotPetya was a supply chain attack where somebody compromised a server that was delivering accounting software. Software components, there's no checks. You could put anything into npm. There's been attacks the whole year about lookalike packages. One example with Kite Software. Kite Software actually went as far as acquiring open source add-on plugins and commercializing them. There have been issues with packaging permissions. Cache is a Java package, which every time it starts calls home. Do you know what components are inside? Don't. And it's hard to figure this out. There are solutions around it. They're not perfect. But the bottom line is that you're relying on multiple other components that may be compromised. Runtime libraries, another thing people are not aware. If you're building an Android application, I can almost guarantee you probably have Crashlytics. Crashlytics is it's a Twitter now Google product that does error handling, catches an error, sends it back to them, and then you could look at it. Now, my formal testing has shown a lot of the error handling libraries have SSL issues because by design you want to know when an SSL error happens. That also means that they can then grab an encryption key, grab encrypted content, and a lot of times people who make mobile apps, oh great, we're going to put this SDK in, and they don't. And some of them have binary components, especially on Android. We don't know what they do, and definitely there are issues around the crash handling. They're misconfigured. They will talk to their own servers. We don't know who owns those servers, and it's a problem. For example, Baidu, which is a mapping SDK, will send stuff back to Baidu. Google will send stuff to Google. Will process. Anywhere within there you could attack. Bug databases. Mozilla's bug database was breached about 2 years ago, and supposedly by the Russians. And they were able to get security bugs, which they then build a zero-day Firefox and train. Developers can be compromised. Your source code repository can be compromised. Your build server can be compromised. All of those things aren't necessarily things you would normally are thinking about securing as much as, let's say, your source code itself. But they are there. And there are instances over and over and over where all of these other things become exposed. This is the last one. This is what I call the tinfoil examples. Here's the problem with supply chain attacks. People want to be really paranoid. There's no answer. Last example is false. I haven't called that. All of the other examples are true. NSA has been found to intercept hardware shipments. It's true. Viruses infect firmware and hard drives. It's also true. This antivirus software grabs files. NSA. Baseband modems and phones can be attacked. You could have malicious microchips and laptops. That's Lenovo. Government because of that, allegedly. Malware can travel by sound. Research around that. Into crypto. There's research right now about whether the crypto standards have been compromised. You got pacemakers that can kill people. That's not sci-fi. That's a thing St. Jude just recalled a bunch of them. No crash is not. However, that's actually a sci-fi book. We're not that far. My point with supply chain attacks is going back to threat modeling. At a certain point, you have to wake up and kind of stop, because the average phone have hundreds of. There's no way anybody can go and audit every single. Even though there are, Black Phone is trying. There's some open source efforts that are trying. Very hard to go ahead and start looking at every single microchip and every single piece of software is very, very hard. The example I'm just showing you here is how deep this can go. But at a certain point, you've got to sort of threat model and start. Now, go from the matrix. You could ignore all of this. Wake up in the morning, believe whatever. Go use your crypto and think you're safe. Or if you are from law enforcement side, go ahead and outlaw the crypto and that the society will be safe. One is true. Or you can take into account all of the non-crypto attacks, start thinking about ways to Here's the point I want to get. Encryption is very powerful if it's implemented correctly. However, that's only one security toolbox. There are many attacks here that I've discussed, and many more. However, fortunately, most average users will still fall for it. So the threat modeling is important. Yes, these attacks are great, but you have to threat model. Also, we don't have enough attackers. It requires knowledgeable people. There's only so many people in the world that can write firmware infecting malware. Or, for example, ones that go into hardware firmware. Or people who put Linux chips, or get them out. What the point I want to take is that obviously don't take claims of others for granted. A lot of crypto messengers say we're audited, we're great, whatever. You start digging. I'm telling you, I've looked at a bunch of different. I don't assume there's always a possibility of something. We should check for ourselves. And I'm really hoping that this will spark further conversation around sort of the non-crypto mobile and around encryption in general. Any questions? Across. That is one example that it happens at the border. Cases. That's the closest equivalent to $5 rate. The problem is, so if you don't bring a phone, you have problems. If you clean phone, you have problems. Which is the example I'm giving is that you bring your phone, but the stuff you really lock down, don't bring that stuff or encryption. Right, that's what I'm saying. So that is where it comes from. Like, I don't think anybody's going around and bashing people in the head. But, for example, actually yesterday, where somebody was flying on a plane, fell asleep, his wife took his finger and unlocked the phone. Right. One phone has admitted that they are sending their firmware was intentionally modified by them. Up in a lot of data about the apps that are running on the stack. They are telling people to opt out, and they're also saying that they will lock it down a little. But I would not use, for example, there's some serious. Part of the problem was they did not admit it. So yes, they are actively modifying the firmware. Then stop back about running apps. Black phone, yes. Yeah, that's supposedly what BlackRock originally promised the effort public. Would see. There was also another effort. Patient was not doing it. Mozilla was, but yes, ultimately everything I'm discussing theoretical because practically speaking, trust issues so big, it's no way verify trust and make. But I'm just highlighting the awareness of it. There are some things we call not some, but some of the things that I'm discussing, like the firmware, that's something we which is why I think Google directly. Part of the problem has been a lot of them are looking for us guidance. However, so their efforts with nonprofit was fall into this potential which because they go online, they Google, yeah, WhatsApp is else, plus it's not else. So there's an ongoing problem with people in the world that this level of security. If you look at Signal has exactly what you're describing. Yeah. Right. Yeah, thread modeling is a number you have. Because again, most common use, like you said, so definitely have to, but the problem is some situations are that is live where suddenly your threat model elevates suddenly. Then you have to, and the problem is sometimes they find stuff and they get you that even not use. So my main point is if you're developing a application, messaging being the prime example, aware that mobile app development has, and so some of the examples I mentioned, runtime libraries on Android, that stuff. Phone itself, the way you're interacting with that application. That's practical ramifications. Mobile app development, specifically for mobile. A lot of these attacks are mobile specific. Same thing, you know, with the App Store, right? Monitor the App Store. That's not true for desktop. Desktop, you have your website, people, sites, etc. But much easier for really mobile, because my background is aware of how you're building, putting into your application, vendors are putting into your application, how your application. That's really what would be. If somebody's making are not majority of development today. So yeah, you could be Java plugin. They still work, or Flash. Yes, your problem. But majority of development is not. We have a lot of desktop development. Then we moved to web, and now we're kind of moving back to development. Even in the desktop world, Crashlytics doesn't exist. Historically, develop a desktop. Their handling was log on the have the SDK back to something else. System-wide messages times system not the same. Mobile apps, it's almost hard not to write an app without using broadcast, local broadcast versus global broadcast. So a lot of these things going into some of the countries not used. Same thing for networking stack. I mean, networking stacks, unlike the Android networking stack, you roll your own. I mean, for some reason, mobile is more of an issue because of latency. Get the latency. Hasn't been as much of an issue.